fast, and then might start the introductions, Georgette.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. And I think, yeah, Mike's just started recording. So yeah, just to people who are here, a reminder that this will be recorded. We usually trim the beginning, and we usually don't record, or well, we'll record, but we don't post the Q&A. But just because we are recording, just bear that in mind if you don't want to be on video or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still got people coming in, which is great. Yeah, I actually sent this talk to a group at, I sent the link to some people in Adelaide as well, Georgette. So
Thanks, Jenny. I just
yeah.
saw Adam Jones. I've actually sent these to our risk and insurance team as well. So, and Adam
good.
lovely passed on the link to others, so there'll be a few people.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's what we want.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that, Georgette. I've circulated to a number of different universities and insurance contacts, and I've also extended to our insurer and also Uni Mutual, which is Uni SA's insurer.
No pressure.
No pressure. Everyone loves to hear from you, mate. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Adam.
Fantastic. That's good. All right, we'll just wait a bit more, a couple more minutes, because we've now exceeded our expectations.
Oh dear.
Which is a good thing. But we do find that, generally speaking, more people actually listen to the recordings than actually attend in person, which is one of the reasons why we do prioritize recording these talks. Oh, hang on. I keep saying I'm going to introduce, and there's more people coming in. So very nice. So I think we might start. So welcome everybody. Before I introduce the speaker, I would like to welcome you to the Statewide Biobank and recognise that the Statewide Biobank is built on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney. So I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us today. And I'd like to recognise our First Nation people as our first scientists, healers and teachers. So it is a great pleasure to have Dr. Georget Reaiche-Miller here to present to us today. Georgette is going to be known to, I think, everybody in biobanking and to many other people that are joining us. Georgette is the Senior Manager of the University of Adelaide Biobank. She's also Chair of the South Australian Biobanking Technical Reference Group, and she's the current president of the Australasian Biospecimen Network Association, or ABNA, which of course many people here will be members of. So Georgette holds a PhD in Virology and Viral Immunology from the University of Adelaide. And so with this strong research background, including postdoctoral research and student supervision, and of course publications in journals, Georgette has led the University of Adelaide Biobank since 2014. And under her leadership, the Biobank has become a centralised state-of-the-art facility that supports a range of research areas. And she also works closely with university legal, risk and insurance teams to implement university-wide policies, particularly on cold storage management and enhancing the protection and also the sustainability of biospecimen storage. So it really is a great pleasure to introduce Georgette. She will be talking to us about the role of a centralised biobank and robust cold storage management using the University of Adelaide as an example. Thank you again, Georgette, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for the invitation. Really appreciate it. As you said, I've been doing biobanking for a little while now, but my story today will hopefully highlight the different way in which we came into biobanking. So we here at the University of Adelaide have taken into account the role of a centralised facility, but understanding that it doesn't function alone without having a robust cold storage management policy. So just as a way of introduction, just a bit of background on the University of Adelaide, which is not much different to other universities, but so research is the core function here. And there's multiple ultra cold freezers out, what we call local freezers in biological and not biological contents, including human, animal and environmental material across the different schools and faculties within the university. So I guess you could think of the university having multiple small biobanks or collections of importance. Here at the moment, we have more than 200 research groups which use the ultra cold and cryo storage. And our research growth rate varies depending on grants and grant applications. And over the last 5 years, our research growth has increased by 20%. So one of the things that we highlighted or that we worked from the beginning is thinking ahead and trying to be ahead of the growth. I'm preaching to the choir here, but we all know that the impact that freezer failures have in our research and our universities, and it carries a high risk rating, with freezer failure being the third most common adverse event after fire and flood. And it is a university-wide risk. Not only does it pose financial loss, obviously, as we all know, I'm sure that everyone here has had a freezer fail and having had to quantify the loss after. It's a quite complex exercise and can result in potentially unfunded loss or even an uninsurable risk. More on the work side of things, it's not only the financial loss, but the loss of irreplaceable material, which then disrupts careers and PhD studies. I'll be giving a couple of examples where this was a major issue for us. If we don't have research happening, we don't have grant funding, and the reputation of the university gets placed at risk. So although some people might think of freezers failing, it's an insurance issue. It's more of that. It's how it affects research as a whole. We had 13 reported freezer failures between 2010 and 2016, and 2 of them were multi-million dollars. I say 2016 because this is when the policy was introduced, but I will discuss more of that in the next few slides. So I just want to cover 2 of the main multi-million dollar losses which we had, which triggered action from the university. The first loss was 2 freezers that were found 24 hours later where the temperature was warmer than minus 20 degrees. It was during a heat wave. It was put in a room next to a window that didn't have alarm monitoring. It didn't have any backup. And unfortunately, it had more than 10 years of research and samples collected from pregnant mums and babies, more than 500 of them. The estimate loss was of about $21 million. The university, being self-insured, was not going to be able to fund $21 million, and they were only able to provide $6 million funding. But what this meant is that the lab could not continue as such, because you can't recreate 10, 12 years of research worth $21 billion. So unfortunately, 6 of those team members were affected, including student and staff, and there were 3 PhD students that had to start PhDs in different labs because that lab closed down, and it resulted in 9 papers not being published. The second loss happened not long after that one, and unfortunately, it had the "it will never happen to me" mentality. It was one freezer. It was found 6 days later. It was due to a circuit breaker that had tripped during a planned power outage. It didn't have temperature alarm monitoring. It wasn't activated in the freezer, and there was no central monitoring. This one was 10 years of research, in fact, impacting 5 different studies that were using the samples collected from this particular group. And the loss was also at $6 million. So these caused, I guess, with both the Deans of Health Sciences and the Dean of Sciences to reach out to the DBCR asking for help on how we can future-proof our research. So the first thing was to identify the risk associated with this cold storage and the management throughout. So what a working group was created, and what was done as part of this working group was, first of all, do a risk analysis of what was out there and what trouble we could be in if it wasn't managed properly. Then obviously a risk assessment was done, and there was risk mitigation, which is how the policy and the biobank came about. Our 2011 audit and risk exposure analysis was done. At the time, there was unknown numbers of ultra-cold freezers, but what was quickly determined is that they were not adequately monitored or maintained. A high percentage of these freezers were nearly at full capacity, which demonstrated the need for a long-term storage facility, and also that it had poor local recording and cataloguing samples, which also demonstrated the need for a better management system. I want to show you some pictures which you will all be familiar with. This is normally what a freezer in a local lab used to look like here and everywhere. When we did the audit in 2011, this was what the majority of them looked like. There were some that had tried to do their own sorting of the freezers, and very few had proper racking. And this could have been not only because poor lab techniques, but also funding. So as you all know, funding is very tight, and whether researchers can afford a freezer, let alone racks, it can be not an easy task. So the working group was led by the DVCR. So the Biobank and our policy falls under the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research. And again, it was done in response to the request for the executive deans of the two faculties. We had membership from the Division of Research and Innovation, where we sit under, CIs, school managers, campus services, and our legal risk and insurance teams. And as part of that working group, we developed a series of guidelines, which were done to mitigate the risks that we found. But as we know, guidelines are not necessarily followed, and I'll be telling you about our challenges. So in 2014, we introduced the guidelines for complete freezer management, which included the purchase of a LIMS for all university researchers to use and catalogue their samples, guidelines on how to manage the local freezers better, and also the building or creation of a biobank as a central storage facility. So the DVCR was responsible for purchasing the LIMS as well as building the biobank, and the executive deans of both faculties and the head of schools were then responsible for implementing better guidelines for local freezer management. As I mentioned before, guidelines are not necessarily followed, and they weren't, which meant that these guidelines eventually became university-wide policy. This happened in 2016, and it was done to future-proof the research within the university. Again, like I mentioned, mitigating the risk associated with poor management of freezer sample and also data. It combined the guidelines that were introduced in 2014, and then it introduced the actual biobank as a centralised facility, and it addresses risk management, emergency and disaster response plans. So our policy has 13 main principles, which I won't go through all today, or I'll be here for hours. But mainly, all the key take-home message is that all of our university materials that are stored in ultra-cold freezers have to be catalogued in the LIMS, so the Lab Information Monitoring System. We currently use OpenSpecimen. The contents need to be accurately recorded and maintained, and the Adelaide Biobank carries out biennial audits out to the schools to ensure that the policy is being followed and the LIMS records are up to date. We do a lot of training, and we work closely with the researchers themselves to ensure that they have the tools and the capabilities that they need to be following the policy. What we've also done is that we've adjusted our grant acceptance procedures. So it includes a requirement for if your grant requires materials to be stored in ultra cold, they need to tick a box to say that yes, they will follow the policy and use their biobank when required. Failure to comply with the policy means that there is no financial support to assist in re-establishing your research. So if there is a failure and you lose samples, if you have not followed the policy, there's unlikely to be financial support. It may also result in the loss of eligibility for funding until the compliance is met. And like I said, we do biennial audits to ensure that compliance is happening across the university. So the first one introduced was the LIMS. As I said, all materials need to be stored, need to be catalogued in the LIMS. What we have done at Adam will smile, we're in the process of trying to work out how we give a dollar value to samples. But what we had done until now is that we've asked researchers to give their samples a risk rating. We use the university risk matrix, and what I've done is created examples on the side of what it would mean in a lab setting. So it goes from extreme to insignificant. Our policy states that anything that is extreme or irreplaceable has to be stored in the biobank, or at least have a duplicate in the biobank. And anything that is catalogued as major, we strongly encourage them to have backup stores in the biobank. And what we've also found is that once the researchers identify what's suitable for storage, they're also able to dispose samples that that they're no longer going to use or are not a good quality to use. The second one is the guidelines for local freezer management. And this was done to minimise freezer malfunctions. Obviously, freezers are mechanicals and they do fail. But what we're trying to do is to minimise the insurance claims or the losses of samples due to failures. So the policy states that all freezers need to be kept in a secure, alarmed and temperature control room. When we did the original audits, you'll find them in hallways, not necessarily locked up right up against the window, which, you know, our Adelaide summers can get up to 44 degrees, 45. So, you know, we stopped that. They also need to be connected to the BMS or equivalent detection systems. They need to be connected to a backup power and CO2 if possible. They need to display emergency management plans at the front. And this is something that is key. As we all know here, for some reason, freezers tend to fail at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's really important that when security attend to an alarm, they know who the contacts are so that the samples can be moved to an appropriate backup. We also introduce regular professional maintenance to be done at least once a year, and all the records are kept. So for future use, in the event that there is a failure, we can go back to see that it had been maintained and any issues that may have come up from it. They're also required to have backup freezers to provide emergency use, so the researchers will know where these empty backups are, and all the samples are recorded and updated in the LIMS. The third part of this policy is the actual biobank itself. So we are a centralised biorepository. It was a purposely built for, well, now there's 3 facilities, we're about to build the 4, but it's a purposely built, centrally and secure, state-of-the-art facility that was built to house those critical materials that are normally scattered across the university. We have more than 420 minus 80 freezers across all campuses. And so, you know, once the researchers have been given the risk rating to the samples, we provide them with these facilities. So it reduces the risk by storing samples in a place where it's got all backups and redundancies you can think of, and I'll show you a few in a minute. But it also creates space for local freezers, so it reduces the need for new purchases, which has been great, especially for those schools that don't have as much funding as others. So what we store in the biobank is archival materials, so anything that you're actually not able to get again because it's irreplaceable. Backup materials, so if you have current studies ongoing but you want to have duplicates in the biobank for future use, and also materials from long-term and longitudinal studies. And we have quite a few with clinical research happening at the moment, which we have to keep until 2045. One of the things that sets us apart from a lot of biobanks is that we don't only hold human samples, and this is because we were built to support the research that happens across the university. So our biobank currently has 55% of human samples, 38% of animal samples, whether it be veterinary or pre-human studies, and then also 7% of plant and soil samples. The biobank is fitted with multiple redundancies and any alarm you can think of, and we undergo extensive preventative maintenance. And the reason we have this is because we have 4 ideas in mind. If you can prevent it, great. If you're not able to prevent it, if you can detect it early, it means that you have early notification and you're able to have a rapid response. And we have been able to see this in one of our biobanks. There was a lab next door that had a burst main, like a water pipe. We have water and floor alarms all around the perimeter of the biobank. So we were able to pick up that there was a leak on the corridor before it came into the biobank because we have those early detection systems. So we are very thorough in identifying things early. So the biobanks are all temperature controlled, secure, and we've got 2-way identification. Only biobank staff and security officers are allowed in or have access to the facility. All the freezers are alarmed to security, but we also have a second monitoring, which is wireless. We call it the CEMS, which is a critical equipment monitoring system. And I'll show you in a few slides. It does more than just tell us what the temperature is. So it's important to have 2 ways to be notified that an alarm has gone off or that there's something wrong with the freezer. All of our freezers are either fitted with cryoaccumulators or are very well insulated, which slows the warm-up time by approximately 9 hours. All our freezers are connected to liquid CO2 for backup, and everything in the room is connected to a dedicated generator that can run up to 24 hours. The room has multiple alarms of anything you can think of, and I'll show you in the next slide. We've got 3 facilities, and each facility has got 38 alarms. This is what our BMS looks like. In the mornings, we'll log in, have a look and see if there's anything standing out. We go through, have a look at the scales. So we have our carbon dioxide or our liquid CO2 on scales. So we know that when it's running low, we order some more from BOC and so on. So yeah, 38 alarms. In terms of the SEMS, this is the remote monitoring that we have for the freezers. Obviously, it tells you what the freezer temperature is, and you set parameters so you get an alarm if the temperature's, the freezer's warming up. But on the bottom left-hand corner, what you can see is that we can see the patterns of the compressors turning on and off. The reason I like this product so much is that we have been able to prevent a freezer failure that had contents in it just by monitoring this. And this is something that Corinne in the biobank does on a weekly basis. We'll log in, she'll have a look and see if there's anything that is looking weird. There have been quite a few freezers that the compressors are doing all sorts of weird things. And if that freezer happens to have samples in it, we take it out and put it into a backup freezer. We have 1:7 ratio of empty backups. We put samples in a backup freezer, and the dodgy compressor looking pattern gets looked at by the preventative maintenance team. So it's quite handy to have. Our preventative maintenance is quite stringent. Mechanically, we service them monthly. So the air conditioning as well as our BMS alarms are tested and calibrated. Our electrical testing, the generators tested and maintained monthly as well. And we follow the university RCD schedule every 3 months. But we also test our separate distribution board on a yearly basis. And this is in line with ISO and also with ISPA's best practice. In terms of our equipment, as I said, most researchers will get their freezers serviced every 12 months, but we get our freezers and our reticulated CO2 systems serviced every 6 months. The reason we're a bit more stringent is because we're saying to our researchers, hey, trust us with your precious samples. So we need to make sure that we've got everything in place. One extra step that we do personally is that we have the cold chain and we do all our transfer procedures ourselves. So transfers to and from the biobank are carried by us. Where they're transferred in dedicated shippers with dry ice, but all the shippers have the data loggers to track the temperatures during transport. So in our records, what we have is the temperature records from the time the samples were collected from the user, the time that the samples spent in the biobank, and also until the samples were delivered to the researchers upon request. So we have cold chain from the minute we pick it up, store it, and the minute we return it. And this is critical for some of our researchers that are doing clinical research. As all biobanks, we treat all samples as treated as infectious, but being a virologist, one thing I love to say is that we treat the samples as if they have the lethality of Ebola, the longevity of Hep B, and the transmission of influenza. Just my virology hat going in, but it's one of those things that we take seriously. I sort of said at the beginning, challenges, yes, we've had quite a few. And over the years, it took us a good 4 years, and I'll show you a table a bit later on, to get to where we are today. The main challenge was really changing the culture. And this is still an ongoing process, and it will continue to be as new researchers come on board. Our key challenges are, which everyone will relate to, is the lack of funding to store materials in a biobank, the lack of time and funding to support the cataloguing of the materials in the local freezers, ensuring that there's correct and consistent labelling. The number of times you go to a freezer and it says John's box and sample 1, 2, 3, 4 without actually saying what it is. And the lack of funding for the maintenance, the preventive maintenance and the purchase of freezers. So I'm going to address each one individually so that you can see the challenges that we went through and what we did to mitigate those. So the first one was looking at the lack of funding to store the contents in the biobank. Originally, when we set up the biobank back in 2013, 2014, it was a user pay system. So researchers were charged, whether it was by box, by rack or by shelf. But it wasn't a great model because our researchers, NHMRC grants run out. There's years that they go without having a grant. So there wasn't much confidence in the ongoing project funding. So it was actually seen as a disincentive by the schools and the researchers. And because the reason the biobank was built was to protect research, there was no point on charging users if they didn't have the funding to use the biobank. So the previous director of the biobank, which some of you may know, Angus Netting and myself, worked really hard on a proposal which got approved. So now the biobank is a co-funded facility. There's no direct cost to the schools or the researchers themselves. We're funded half by the DRI office directly into the So that funding pays for the maintenance, software licenses, the replacement of freezers, alarming, and our staffing. And as I said, we sit under the DRI and under the current DBCR. The next challenge was the lack of time and funding to support the cataloguing of the contents. And we have to remember that as I said, because we've got research from human to plant and soil, cataloguing samples was not something that researchers were used to doing, so it was very uncommon. Originally, when it was set up, it was believed that a single person will be appointed to manage the data, which is not feasible at all. But this was because originally we had limited licenses. We purchased unlimited and multi-user licenses, which now allows all researchers and groups to be responsible for managing their own material. And what we do is that we run constant training courses to ensure that the researchers have the tools they need to be able to catalogue them comfortably. That way, everyone's responsible for their own material and they don't have to rely on anyone else to do it with. Correct and consistent labelling. This is a major risk, again, to funding and publication. There was a couple of researchers that left a particular group. They had great data. They had submitted a paper. They got sent back for the CI to do extra experiments. They couldn't continue the paper because the samples were so poorly labelled that they didn't really know what samples were used in the study. So it really is at risk for the uni. And also, if things are not labelled properly during a breakdown, when you're moving samples to a backup freezer, it's not going to be easily identifiable. So now, as part of the school inductions for new staff and students, I run a research material management training session, which is mandatory. And what that does is that it teaches people as they're coming in good laboratory practices, how to standardise the storage, how to do the labelling properly and record these. And also what I've already started doing and will be introducing as part of the new university. Sorry, for those of you that don't know, the University of Adelaide and the University of South Australia are going to merge. And we're becoming the Adelaide University in 1st of January 2026. So one of the things that I'll be implementing or adding to this material management training is the data management, including care and fair principles as we grow bigger. We have found throughout the time that we've been auditing that the labelling and the procedures have improved, and it is all about changing the culture, and changing it early as researchers come on board has made a huge difference. The other challenge was lack of funding for freezer maintenance and purchases. So, as I said, we require them to service their freezers every 12 months and also, buy new freezers as they die. We created a working group, so myself and a few of the infrastructure managers, and involved strategic procurement. We've undergone tender processes, and now we have preferred suppliers for both the purchase of freezers and the maintenance of freezers. Because we have so many across the university, in terms of the maintenance, for example, we've locked in a price that's 50% cheaper than what it would be if you were to service your freezers separately. And we have also have special prices for freezers themselves. What some schools and faculties have done at a local level is that they've done their own little thing to encourage the cataloguing. So those that had extra funding, they were able to employ dedicated staff to help with the process. Some have denied the purchase of new freezers that are going to be used for expansion, not a new freezer because one's old and it's meant to go. But for those that are just wanting to expand and not catalogue contents and put them into the biobank or dispose of, they've been denied. They've also implementing charging for space used in local freezers, and even denied the move from an old to a new building if contents were not catalogued and stored accordingly. So these are all incentives that the local schools have done. And they've also, some of the schools have ensured local funding is available to fund the yearly maintenance of the freezers. So this is no longer the responsibility of the researchers. It falls with the facility managers. And a particular school or faculty has introduced their own policy for replacement of older freezers that are older than 10 years. And again, they fund these, the researchers don't fund it themselves. So as a big team, we've all worked together to ensure that we've got a good system in place. So what have we achieved so far? Implementing the policy was a saviour. It reduced the sample and financial loss from these failures. As I said, they're all mechanical, so they will fail at some stage, generally at 3 o'clock in the morning. But not all failures have to result in losses. So we only had one loss in between 2015 and 2020. And this was a freezer that still said it was at -80. But when the researcher opened the freezer, everything had thawed. So there was nothing wrong with the alarming or the monitoring of the freezer itself, because it was still telling us that it was -80. It was just something with the freezer. So that's the only loss we've had really, compared to 12 claims between 2010 and 2015. So there's a little representation here that our risk and insurance team provided for me yesterday. So really thankful for that. If you have a look at the first bar, it looks at -80 freezers. So the policy was introduced in 2014, as it's highlighted on with an arrow at the bottom here. We can see that after this date, we've had the single claim for -80s. What you can also see is that -20, which is just underneath it, the freezer claims started also around the same time. So what we did in 2019 is that the policy underwent a review. So every 3 years we review the policy. And because of the success of the -80 freezer failure or loss claims, we have now included -20 freezers. You can see that here in 2019. We've included -20 freezers in the management as well as liquid nitrogen tanks. And again, what you can see is that once the policy also included the better management of the -20s, we've also just had one claim. So what we're doing has clearly worked, and it has reduced the amount of, or the multi-million dollars that the university would have had to put in claims. This is a little table showing where we started in 2011. 2014, we introduced the guidelines. 2015, we had some uptake. We were able to identify freezer numbers. The research groups, only 8 were using the biobanks and only 11 were using the LIMS. 2016, we introduced the policy. 2017, as I said, we do audits every 2 years. The audit in 2017 increased the numbers. We identified more freezers, more research groups, and more people were using the biobank, more people were using the LIMS, and the training increased. Fast forward every 2 years to 2023, and we can see that we've got 210 research group. This was 2023, and out of those 210, 176 were using the LIMS, and almost 900 researchers were trained and using the system. So 2025 audits will have commenced, so we'll be able to have more data on the 2025, but based on what we have seen and the rate of compliance, I don't expect it to be decreasing in any way. So one of the things that we've learned is to plan for the unexpected. Some of you may have been aware of the statewide power outage we had in 2016. And it really highlighted the importance of a business continuity plan, which we are in the biobank, and when I say the biobank is the biobank and the rest of the university management, we have a good plan in place. So it really tested our backups and our planning. We performed as well as we had planned. Our generator had 24-hour capacity, but it didn't need refueling, luckily. And all our backups and everything didn't really need to be utilising this particular incident. With regards to the local freezers, not much temperature was lost because luckily the power was restored within 8 to 10 hours. So no samples were lost or claimed, but it was a reality check for the local researchers that were not taking this policy and the seriousness of protecting the samples seriously. And it was a real reality check. And from then on, you could see that the increase of people willing to take part had increased. So we had our business continuity plan in place, but one thing that we did add is that we now have diesel stored locally in case of another power outage that requires more than 24 hours. And I know that risk is not a sexy topic for anybody, but I can't highlight enough how important risk registers and disaster recovery plans are, and it is a must, whether it's just for your local lab, for your institution, or for a biobank. And I wouldn't be me if I wasn't going to advertise something related to ABNA, wearing my ABNA hat. We have multiple special interest groups, and the Quality Management Special Interest Group has a working group within it that looks exactly at risk and disaster recovery. So for those of you that are in this area or are looking to get into this area, please reach out, because this is a real, it's a thing, and we've got the means to help you with. And also our annual conference is coming up in October. So even if you're interested, please reach out and come and join us, because we'll be discussing some of these topics then. So in terms of the University of Adelaide, what are our next steps? So we have expanded our services, again, not just our collection, storing, but also supporting our research, or what we like to call our hybrid model. So a centralised facility was also helping the local researchers. Our services now include active sample storage, not just storing samples and leaving them there until whenever you need them. It's actually actively used. Sample disposal, we've introduced policies for. We have the robust data management, not only for the biobank, but also locally. We advise on experimental design, and I've been doing this for a fair few years now, and also budgeting for grant applications, whether it's ARC, NHMRC or MRFFs, which we support a lot of. But more importantly, we have education and training, which happen regularly to help maintain the change of culture and educate people that are coming on board, whether it's new researchers or just new researchers to the university. In 2023, the biobank, we expanded to a new facility, which is running out of space this year. As I said, we have materials from 3 major long-term critical clinical studies, which will require storage until 2045. So we're currently building a transition biobank to accommodate growth until 2028. Now, that's a temporary or transition because, as I said, we are merging and we're becoming a new university, so Adelaide University. We're working together in the scope of the development of a new standalone facility, which will incorporate cryo storage as well as ultra cold storage, sample processing capabilities, with an emphasis on sustainable energy, biobanking, as well as extending our services to non-university researchers. So one of the things that we say to people is that you hope for the best, plan for the worst, but you have to be prepared for the unexpected. And the 2016 was a prime example of that. So this is a team effort. There's a lot of us at the university that worked for this. We have the constant support of our database and servers in ITDS for the data management. As I said, our legal and risk and insurance teams, we couldn't do this without them. All of our funding and the support from DRI and the DVCR, and also our people that are on the ground, security, doing our checks all the time, infrastructure, supporting our systems and the alarm and monitoring. So yeah, so that's our story, and I am more than happy to take questions. I think I've stopped sharing. Teams and me are not friends.
Georgette, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. And I've got so many questions, but I can see that we've got some in the chat, and people would like to either pop a question in the chat or raise your hand. I'm sure we've got some time, and I think we're going to have some great discussion. So Dan has put a question in the chat. How has the establishment of the biobanking infrastructure advanced the research profile of the University of Adelaide overall? And is there a metric that you use to show the impact that all of this has had on the research that's kind of coming to and being performed by the University of Adelaide?
That's a great question, Dan. And the second one we're really strongly working towards, and we've sort of started. So when our users go to, whether it's booking into a training session or whether it's using the biobank, we track and we do our metrics in determining how useful is, how is the biobank used? Originally, I thought that we were going to be only going in and nothing going out, but it's almost 70-30, so 70% going in, 30 going out. And because we have been able to provide this infrastructure, there's 4 research groups that use the facility that now collaborate internationally, because we're able to provide the quality management or quality assurance that the samples are stored safely. So it has improved funding and research capability for some of the research groups. In terms of the metrics, this is something that, again, we can sort of capture what the usage of the biobank is. This is something that we're learning from Microscopy Australia on how to do better. Their team tracks publications, which either uses, in terms of here, Adelaide Microscopy, and also how they use, whether they use whether they're added as authors or whether they get acknowledged. So that is something that we are in the process working towards. So when our biobank users, we tell them, when you're going to publish, let us know. There have been some groups that do have us as authors, and we know of some that have been acknowledged, but we have not got it right in terms of how do we extract that information if the researchers themselves don't tell us. So that is a work in progress.
Thanks, Georgette. They're great examples. I think, the challenge of tracking publications is as you say, it's not as easy as it sounds. And I think the national research infrastructure facilities have often got that down to a pretty fine art. So I agree, it's a really good, they're the best people to learn from, I think. They really know how to do this. Ben's popped another question in. Just, are you considering ISO 20387?
Yes and no. So we are working, so everything that we do, all our procedures and practices and our management of the biobank is done to ISO standards the best we can. We underwent the biobanking assessment tool by ISPA, which compared the two. We're currently sitting at 93% compliance with ISO standards. The sections that we're not compliant is processing, because we don't offer processing yet. So we are working to the standard. However, we would not go to actual accreditation until researchers require it. Obviously, the cost associated and the amount of extra work, it may not be worth it if no one's interested, but that is why we've built and we do it to standards. So in the case that a researcher needs it, we would be all ready to go.
That's a very pragmatic approach, I think. It's true that generally biobanks seem to be more interested in accreditation than the research community, who have different kind of priorities, as you will be well aware. Look, if people have got other questions, please pop up your hand or put it into the chat. Look, I'm going to ask a question as well. I'm going to roll, and then I'll get to Michael's question in the chat. One thing I noticed in terms of metrics is it seems like your numbers of freezers have really risen quite dramatically.
Yes.
Do you think that the fact that you're offering this infrastructure is, in a way, and incentivizes the use of new freezers? And I guess, how can that be managed?
No. So it's actually that they have been around, but they didn't know that they existed.
Oh, okay. So
yes. So by encouraging the researchers to catalogue their freezers, and when we go around doing the audits, we've been able to identify them. But also, as I mentioned before, we did have in the last 5 years a 20-25% increase in research. So there are some freezers that have been bought for the new research that's being established, but it's more just that they were there and people didn't know that they existed.
Right, thank you. So I'll go to Michael's question, which is a great question. Absolutely wonderful and inspiring example of what biobanking and universities need to aspire to. Completely agree. Did you find it challenging to get buy-in from research groups or divisions initially? And was this made easier by a fully funded centralised model?
100%. So we had the complete spectrum. We had the researchers that already had their own, Excel or Access database and knew exactly what everything was because they really cared about the research. And we had the other side of, I don't have time for this. My samples are in there, and I don't care if they perish. But when push came to shove, and we had to chat to them and say, well, if you lose your samples and you don't get funding, is that really what you want? And the answer was no. So yes, there was a lot of pushback. Again, mainly the main challenge was the lack of funding and time for the researchers to comply with what we were asking. And the funding model that is now a core facility definitely, absolutely supported this, because researchers do not have the funding to store contents in the biobank. So, facilitating that and all the other services and support that we offer made the big difference. It's one of those things that, we've had a lot of researchers discuss and say, it'd be great if we could do it, but there's only so much we can do from the bottom up. It really has to come from the top down.
Yeah, that's I think that was the thing that struck me right at the beginning when you said, it became a university policy, and then, that's just, you can't do it without that. You just can't. It has to become policy. And I think that's very impressive that was achieved, early on. Look, if people have got other questions, please pop up your hand. but I'll ask a couple. I was kind of intrigued by the fact that you said that you've got a 1:7 like backup freezer ratio. I'm wondering
Yes.
how you arrived at that number.
So,
Whether that's just kind of like back of the envelope, or is that what works, or?
Yeah, so normally, like if you have a look through a lot of the literature, it is recommended to have 1:10 ratio. And that is what we tell our researchers to have. As in our, our schools, the facility managers are asked to have at least 1:10. But because we are telling our researchers that we're housing your extra special samples, it's more of a precaution and to make sure that we are providing the extra backup in the event that something was to go wrong.
Yes.
I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having the 1:10 published out there, but we've just been that extra little bit careful to provide, just a bit more precaution.
Yeah, kind of like you're actually servicing your freezers every 6 months.
Yes, exactly.
To really send that strong message that we really care.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question from Glenn Mowbray. So does the policy have a mechanism to say no to adding research into the biobank? And do you have a policy and approach for destruction or disposal of research samples from researchers to control operational costs and growth demands?
Yes.
What would be the core considerations in managing these constraints?
Yes. So as I said, it all falls with, we rely on the honesty of the researchers, because obviously I can't tell them, yes, your sample's high risk, or no, it's not. If they identify that the contents are high risk, the biobank is there to support them. We do not take anything that is insignificant or minor or even moderate. It's generally just major and irreplaceable. So when they go back to the risk matrix, if it's something that they can easily replace, we don't take on, because it's a footprint. So we protect those that are either going to be costly to replace or are not replaceable. In terms of disposal, this is something that also ABNA has a working group on, and it's developing the correct guidelines to have proper disposal. What we do here in the biobank is that at the end of each year, we reach out to the researchers and say, hey, you've got these samples within the biobank. In Open Specimen, we've got the date of when they were transferred in. So what we normally go is by the rule of thumb that you need to keep, NHMRC, you need to keep your samples for 5 years after publication. We touch base with the researchers and say, hey, where are you up to with this? And then we keep that on record and then reach out constantly. And I can say that some researchers have actually gone back and said, yep, we don't need them anymore. Or, I've retired, those samples are going to be shared with another university. So we've had quite a few retrievals, large retrievals based around that. So that's how we manage it. It's still not great. We still need to perfect it, but it seems to be working so far.
Great. Yeah. I guess what about, there's the NHMRC requirements, but there's also like some people will have specific ethics approvals that might stipulate, variable approaches. And often it's the researchers that know about that. You won't necessarily know.
Yep. So the researchers tell us that before. So when samples get transferred into the biobank, there's a whole list of questions that they need to answer. And this is one of them. So like I said, we have 3 groups that ethically they have to store the samples until the kids are 25 years old. So we have to keep those samples until 2045. And that's because that's what they have. So if anything falls out of the usual 5 years post-publication, we are notified and we have that on record. So we know not to bother that researcher for 25 years.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really great. That's amazing. I think I've got one more question. Yes, I was very impressed by the fact that you've now got a research material training session that you lead at the University for new staff. Is that also recorded, and is that available sort of for refresher training or when new people? Yep. Okay.
Yep. So we did through COVID actually. So they were all face-to-face to start with, and we used to run them, I think, every fortnight or every month, just whenever they had the bigger intakes. When COVID came, I went into a lecture theatre and locked myself in and made a recording of it. So now all the schools and faculties have it available so they can give it to the researchers. As I said, one of the aspects that I will be incorporating, pardon me, I'll be attending the Research Data Week later on in October. So one of the things that I'm trying to get from that is more information to ensure that we've got the right steps in the data management side of things. Then I plan to introduce that, and then as part of the new Adelaide University, add that to the training course. So it's not just physically how do you catalogue your samples and how do you store them in the freezer, but also how do you make sure that your data is appropriate.
Yes. That's a good point. And I guess, and I mean, another group of people that might find this kind of recording really helpful would be ethics committees as well.
Yes.
Even sort of, making sure that they've got it available for their members, or that so that they can also give it to applicants and things.
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just seeing, does anyone else have any other questions? I know I've been asking a lot. But,
Oh,
well,
God, don't. I just saw that question come up from Ben. Don't ask that question.
Okay, how do you
Did you want to
assign
read
a
it, Jenny?
dollar value? Yeah, with sample loss from freezer failure.
Yes.
Yeah, good question.
So as I said before, this is something that Adam, myself, and a few of the team are working towards. So University of South Australia, and Adam, jump in if you know more, but currently the University of South Australia is insured by Unimutual. And as part of their process, they've been given 3 different ways in which they can quantify the value of samples. Adam, did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, they've got their own methodology for valuation of samples. It is a proprietary piece of information that we have seen. We're working with our broker who has some experience in this space in valuing research samples. So when we are formed under the Adelaide University banner, then we'll be putting a lot more effort into that space. At the moment, Unimutual do offer a service if you are a member where they will come out and they will apply their methodology and provide a valuation for you as part of your membership fee. And that's what UniSA have in place and have continued to index year on year. So we'll be looking to put some more effort in this space in the coming months.
Yeah, and currently the way that we do it is retrospectively. So in the event that a freezer was to fail, then it's pretty much going through all the samples. And I say that because I did that back in 2004 when our freezer failed. It's just, we had samples from animals. It's really taking into account what the cost was to house the animals, what kits were purchased, the time, that was spent creating those samples. So it is a very labor intensive, but it's the more accurate way to do it. And so that's normally how we do it. But the way we've been getting around it so far is with a risk rating, because if you've got a freezer that you say has got major and moderate samples, or if you have something that's moderate and insignificant, you can't claim $2 million when you've said that your samples are not that critical, and vice versa. But so we're working towards the dollar value.
Yeah, in any event, as is the case with all insurance claims, you've got to be able to substantiate your loss. So if you claim for $1 million, you've got to be able to substantiate how you came to that $1 million valuation. That might be a percentage of the grant that was delivered to university. It might be the cost and hours put in, obviously not exceeding the value or the overall value of the grant. It might very well be a case that you might not have applied a valuation to the particular piece of a research specimen, and you might not want to replace it in the future. So we might opt not to insure it altogether. So it's quite a large project to go back and backdate all of the valuations for all of the stuff that we've got in our biobanks and our freezers across the campus. At the moment, we've worked quite closely with our current insurer, FM, who have been very supportive. They insure a number of the large universities under GO8. And we've got a sublimited approach. They're quite open to insuring these research specimens. They've got varying ways in which they can support that with other universities, such as University of Melbourne, etc. So they're really quite open to helping us find a solution that just really comes down to how we want to value it and recording it.
It's very interesting. I'm thinking maybe we need a session devoted to this, because it is an important topic, and I don't think we talk about it a lot in biobanking.
Yeah.
Yep. I can see we've got a couple of other questions. So Layla has asked, can you please talk more about the active storage service that you provide? For example, do you police room access? Is there sort of separation for high value items?
No. So like I said, we've got the 3 facilities. We just populate them as they go. So we don't say this one's for higher value, this one's not. We sort of spread the risk throughout all 3. But the active storage is, the researcher will put contents in the biobank because they're critical, or because they don't have the active room, so the space in the local freezer, Our biobank originally was, if you're not going to access your samples for 6 to 12 months, then store it in the biobank. But that's no longer the case, because when we have this particular clinical research studies where, you know, people from Germany are requesting samples, then they need the samples and we need to give it to them. We also have now room temperature storage for FFPEs and slides. And again, when they're taken from patients and they're processed, then they come to us. They need them back to do some staining, and then they bring them back. So it's that sort of level of active storage. So it's no longer long-term storage.
Thank you. Look, we've still got a couple of minutes. If anyone has a burning question, feel free to ask. But yes, this talk will be recorded. I have a strong feeling that a lot of people are going to be listening to it. Georgette, that was just a wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Jenny.
Again, congratulations to all of your team. I think that many of us here understand the difficulty of what you've undertaken and what you've achieved. And I agree entirely that this is a wonderful example for other universities and organisations that have biobanking needs at scale and exactly how they need to be managed. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And thanks to everybody for joining. And I think our next talk will be later in August, where we will be joined by the first author of a recent paper about biobanking value that was published in PNAS. So we're looking forward to that. But thank you, Georgette, so much.
Thanks, Jenny, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, we are blessed to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Thanks, Georgette.
Okay, thanks.
Bye. Have a good
Bye.
afternoon, everyone.
You too.